So when somebody is like, they have gray hair and, they have pain in their back and knees. I'm describing myself. uh, to the doctor, like it's scary how not important that is to that doctor.
Well, I feel like there's this idea that like, oh yeah, when you're older, everything hurts and your life sucks. So don't go to the doctor about it. What's the doctor going to do? You're just old. Like, that's
Yeah.
not helpful. That's not doing any good for anybody.
My point was, what I was getting at earlier, was that all of these things are treatable in young people.
Right.
But for old people, they're just considered normal and part of the aging process. And
Yeah,
I think
that's a
that's
really
so
good point.
discriminatory when we can treat it in some people but not others.
Right. Yeah, like, oh, your
It's
knees hurt. Oh, you're
not
just
okay.
old. Go home.
Yeah,
Like, well, that it's not great to be living with knee pain, but yeah, it's like there's like a devaluation of the quality of life for older people. And
right.
yeah, and like there's no reason that older people should be just like disqualified from doing all the things that they want to do, or just like left to be uncomfortable every time they move because they're old. But I think that is the expectation. Um like, and we all grew up with these images of, like frail, helpless older people. And like, well, yes, it is true that aging does take a toll on your body. And we're not saying that like every person above a certain age should still be like frolicking in the meadow, like in the yogurt commercials where like everybody's so happy. Like, but at the same
Yes.
time, yeah, it seems that there's a level of invisibility where people that they're not being treated like people. They're being treated like old people, and that is a different thing. It's a different category. Um, and
Right.
I was thinking about like why this is particularly a problem that needs to be addressed in through the lens of colonization and patriarchy. And there are several that really popped out to me, but one that really hit me in my own thinking was that, particularly when applied to women, the categorization of being old makes you very invisible in our culture. And that inherently undermines all of the wisdom that you have gathered over the course of your life. And it invisibilizes you to the point where the contributions that, as an elder, as a person who has so much experience and has learned so much over the course of their lives, all of that gets disappeared. And we're basically functionally taking the role of, a statesperson and an elder, like a valued member of society, away from older women who may have a lot of really important, possibly destabilizing things to say. And I think that is very much, I don't know if it's on purpose, but it certainly serves a purpose for the systems that are in place and the powers that be to silence older women.
Right. For a lot of old people, there's a lot of key myths that have been conceptualized in relation to older people's sexuality. And so some of those are like lack of sexual desire.
Mm-hmm.
And that includes looking at sexuality only from a biomedical perspective for old people.
Yeah, like treating sexuality as a medical problem. Like it's all, especially for women. Like I was just, looking through some websites that I found when I searched for ageism and sexuality, and they were all like, menopause makes you vaginally dry. See a doctor. And it's like, could we talk about anything aside from vaginal dryness? Like, could we just, I mean,
Yeah.
sure, that's a real thing. I don't want to say that doesn't happen and that people don't, shouldn't be entitled to treatment for it, but there's a whole lot of other things that I'm sure go on for older people, that
Yeah.
have to do with vaginas aside from the dryness issue. Like, it's
the little blue pill is also like that's associated with old people when
right.
people of all different ages use it for different reasons.
Yeah.
Also, the physical unattractiveness and undesirability of older people, which
Hmm.
is, again, particularly evident in relation to gender.
Yeah.
The idea that it's shameful and perverse for older people to engage in sexual activity,
Hmm.
and the invisibility of older LGBTQIA
Right. Yeah.
community members and individuals who may need to return to the closet later in life. Uh,
Oh, yeah. Hmm. Yeah, I guess one of the things that's going to be really interesting to see as we age is people who have lived their lives, as openly gay, um,
mhm.
aging in much greater numbers over time and
Yeah,
seeing kind of, how that changes things. And same for, trans folks, especially. I think the way that things are medicalized for older people is going to have to be applied to a larger and larger trans populations. And I think we're going to start to see a lot of the ways that the medical community has failed us by breaking things down into cisgender male, cisgender female, and leaving it at that.
right. Yeah, totally. And I think it's a shame that society has forced that to happen, like people to go into the closet when they're older, to go back into the closet when they're older. That's something that shouldn't exist.
It's really interesting for me to think about like when I was a kid, and I think about the associations that I had with, quote, old people. If I were a kid now, what my association with, quote, old people would be, if like any of the visual things that come to mind would overlap at all, or if things have really changed in any way. Um, and I was thinking about this before, but then today, while I was doing some research, I came across this meme, I guess, that popped up after last year's Super Bowl, where J-Lo was the halftime act. And
Yeah.
last year, during her halftime act, she was 50 years old. And I
Uh-huh.
remember there being a big discussion about that, and people were like, wow, she's 50 and she's so fit and sexy, and J-Lo, wow. So somebody made a meme that has a picture of Blanche Devereaux from the Golden Girls, and it
Uh-huh.
says 50 years old in 1985. And then next to it is an image of J-Lo pole dancing at the halftime show, and it says 50 years old in 2020. And the difference between the two pictures is supposed to be really stark. Like, oh, Blanche
Yeah.
looks so old. She's got the like old lady kind of haircut. She's got the shoulder pads. She's got the look of an older woman as we imagined older women in 1985. And then J-Lo, obviously is like super freaking muscular and like climbing up the pole, and she's got this long flowing hair, and she's very youthful looking, right? Um, and there's like so many things in that one image that I was like amazed by. But the first one would be that in 1985, when I was young and the Golden Girls was coming out, Blanche Devereaux did not look old to me. She was not what I thought of when I thought of an old woman. She was the sexy one. She was the very, vital and exuberant and energetic and sexually active one on the Golden Girls, who was supposed to be like the youngest of them.
Yeah, but here's the other thing though. Like in Golden Girls, they were made up to look like what society thought that old people should look like at that time,
Good
which
point.
is
None of them were that old.
ridiculous. Because, yeah, none of them are that old, but it's also ridiculous because you have actual women who are that age at that time who could easily look at designing women.
Yeah. Oh God. God, I gotta rewatch that show. It's been a long time.
I will rewatch that with you.
Awesome.
Um, the women are like really not that much younger. I think they're almost the same age even as like Blanche was
Huh.
in Golden Girls. But they're like considered like these southern like business women, and they're all
Uh,
like beautiful, and they're all like mouthy, and they're all the sexy one in different ways.
yeah, true.
And so like they're taking this image of Blanche Devereaux, who is made up to look like what people think old people should look like, next to a woman who is out there doing her thing, not made up to look like an old woman. She's made up to look like herself.
Huh.
She's made up to look like an icon, you know. So that's the
Yeah.
difference between those pictures that people were putting up.
That is a really good point. I love that. Yeah, like, yeah. And it brings up the idea that they're like, that as you age, you are supposed to become less yourself somehow. Like, you're supposed to, I don't know, fall in line with what we think old people are like. The weird thing about that is that, and I have experienced this myself, and I have heard a lot of people I know talk about it, and I have read a lot about it, is that particularly for women, many, many women, certainly not all, as they age, do sort of become more themselves. They start giving
Yeah.
less of a fuck about what other people think of them and start, living more for themselves for a really long list of reasons. And yet, when we portray older people and when we talk about older people, we still tend to think of them in this lumped together category where, like, they all have the same haircut and they all wear the same ugly clothes and they don't really do much except for buy insurance. Like, what's going on with that? Why is that? Why are we erasing the lived experiences of so many people who are supposed to be the people we're looking up to,
There's a preoccupation with sexuality and belief about what normal and appropriate sexual behavior means to
Yeah.
different age groups. And like you said, media erases people who work to build our sense of what is normal or abnormal for society. Or we imitate it and then it reflects what's happening in the world. Like, it clearly contributes to ageism.
Yeah.
I mean, let's explore some of the stereotypes. Like, let's talk about the cougar for a minute.
Oh my God, I was just going to bring this up.
Really?
Because as we may know, I happen to know a lot about pornography, and I have done a ton of research and writing about various things in porn. But one thing that has really interested me for a long time is the MILFs and cougars phenomenon in pornography. And a really interesting truth about porn is that we are more or less always expecting, if we go to a porn website, to see young people, particularly young women, because we have been socialized to think of youth as the equivalent of sexy when it comes to women's bodies, for a lot of reasons. And I could go on a whole rant about that as well. But the reality is that MILF porn, older women in porn, is way more popular as a category than younger women. In 2019, the year 2019, MILF was the fourth most searched term on Pornhub. And it had been knocked down like one or two notches for the year before that by the term Japanese, which rocketed up to number 1 or number 2, I think. Because people in Japan suddenly started using Pornhub like way more than they had before. So things were a little bit upset, but I think before that, MILF was number 2 or number 3. So in 2019, MILF was the fourth most searched term on Pornhub, which is one of the world's biggest porn websites. And the term teen, which is pretty much, porn shorthand for anyone who's not a MILF, was number 11. So MILF is a full 8 spots above teen when it comes to what people are looking for in pornography. And there's kind of two ways of looking at that. One being that because the women in porn are assumed to be young, that you must label older women as MILFs in order for people to find them. So you kind of say that, well, maybe the MILF category isn't as big as the rest of everything that is porn, and so it's still a subset. But on the other hand, if people know specifically what they're looking for and they go to Pornhub and they type in the search term for what they want, it is way more often going to be MILF than teen. So what that implies to me is that a lot more people are interested in more mature looking